Hey guys, Kyle, the Death Knight of Anime here, bringing you my late night review of Fire Force Episode 6. And so, with this episode, with the majority of it, it was pretty much focused on the fight between Shinra and Hibana. And revisiting this fight actually made me realize that this is the kind of fight I always wanted, at bare minimum, out of Fairy Tail. Pretty much the kind where the protagonist is relentlessly beaten down, but each and every time he also learns and adapts as the fight continues, and the more he fights the opposite opponent, the more he learns about how they fight, and how to pretty much counter it, I guess. Um, which to be fair, the pretty much end of the fight, it did kind of venture close. It did venture close to the edge of Fairy Tail territory, but as a whole, I think the fight still worked because we basically, like I said, we had those moments of seeing Shinra adapt and learn from pretty much seeing from basically being hit from basically Hibana's abilities, and which, with this kind of fight, it is the best way to go about when dealing with a fight like this, where it's basically a single character who's basically fighting a pretty much top ranked official, or just fighting a top ranked official like Hibana, or just any kind of, and anyone who basically has pretty much a title that would consider to be extremely strong. So yeah, I think so. Yeah, I really like how the fight in itself was handled. It was handled really well, and it was in fact, as far as the fight itself goes, but believe it or not, it was in a lot of ways extended compared to the manga. There's a few moments here and there that were actually added to the fight itself, that were filling in the gaps, and honestly made it better. With this episode, as we see with Hibana, she pretty much summons an entire flame sakura tree, which actually wasn't in the manga. In the manga, all she did was pretty much summon just flame like flower petals, but just flame like flower petals that pretty much came out of nowhere, other than I guess her fan or something. But in the anime, it actually kind of it bridges that gap, so to speak, of showing us showing us her creating that tree, and her just summoning the flower petals from that tree, almost, in a way. But yeah, so yeah, as a whole, just the fight in general, it really is one of those times where it is a case of it's kind of it's basically it's from it's from a Fairy Tail fight, if it was done right, almost, in a way. um and yeah, I just loved the approach. I just love the approach to it. Just seeing Shinra just kind of getting beaten down, and like I said, I just love the approach of just Shinra constantly getting beaten down, but also adapting each and every time to pretty much Hibana, which I think from this point on, I think obviously from this point on, this is the exception in order to teach Shinra just pretty much how powerful a captain really is. So I think so basically from here on, if I remember correctly, we're basically gonna have a lot more team battles of teams of people actually fighting captains over over just Shinra, or just them soloing, them soloing the captains. The other Now, having said that, they pretty much cut out. Now, it's a very small scene, but in this episode, it happened in the end of the episode, but they basically cut out a scene where Shibana had accepted her loss, and she was going to show them like and she said she's going to show them her research notes. So like that like it's a small scene but a pretty important one, and yeah, just that small scene of her being, it was kind of cut out of the entire entire episode in general. So I don't know if they're saving it for the next episode or what's going on there, but yeah. Um, Now, adaptation wise, it was basically a solid episode. But on the flip side, pretty much it goes without saying that the censorship is back in full force again. One thing I will say in terms of the censorship this time around, though, is that based on this episode, at least if what I can assume is going on at David Production when it comes to the censorship of Fire Force, I think what David Production is doing right now is that is that they seem to be aware that there are certain scenes and moments they can't avoid cutting out of the final product, even if they kind of change the, even if they change it around. But when it pretty much gets those moments, what we'll probably end up seeing David Production do is kind of similar to what they did here, where they or they just put a black bar over top of the broadcast while all basically leaving it unedited for like DVDs and whatnot. And while in general I could definitely do with pretty much no censorship. I think this is the best option considering the situation. The only question though is if they're gonna go more down this route with the censorship, or mix it up between cutting scenes out while putting the black bar over other scenes. Like that's the kind of curious thing I'm wondering about now with this. It's weird to say that I'm curious about how they're gonna censor something, but yeah, in this case, it really does. It's a question that does need to be answered because, again, I think David Productions like pretty much knows going forward that there are going to be certain things that they can and can't show. That there are certain things they can't afford to cut out. So yeah, I'm wondering like what or exactly the line is drawn here almost. The other thing I will say is that the camera animation in this episode was a little wonky in the sense where in the episode there was a lot of times where we pretty much get a lot of wide shots in places where there's supposed to be a close up of someone, but it didn't happen like all the time, but there were some key moments with pretty much Hibana that were supposed to be like close-ups of her, but they just went for like a straight up wide shot of her for some reason or another. And yeah, speaking of Hibana herself, the tragedy of Hibana's character continued in this episode as we see from that flashback from that flashback and the time she shared with Iris at the chapel, we pretty much see that there was a time where Hibana genuinely thought her that basically not only that pretty much her power was a gift from the gods, but she also believed that the power she possessed could save people and it could be a driving force for good. Well, like she genuinely believed that from the bottom of her heart, but pretty much like the Joker, all it took was one bad day in order to throw her over the edge, and when she saw the church and her fellow nuns like pretty much burned alive because of that same power, she her fellow sisters and nuns burned by that same power, she pretty much not only lost her faith in that moment, but she pretty much became so traumatized by the event itself that she pretty much gave in. That she pretty much let herself be consumed by her own power, and her perception of what that power is and what it can do changed dramatically. She pretty much only saw her power as something that was destructive, but never for something that pretty much can and that possibly could be used as. But she lost her perception of it ever being used for good again. And in a lot of ways, Hibana's descent into madness illustrates simply how easy it is in order to actually lose the simple things that can keep us like going, like hope and faith. Like it's honestly, like I'm sure there are going to be a lot of religious people out there who tell you different, but honestly, things like hope and faith are a little easier to lose than people like pastors and nuns and whatnot are willing to tell you. But yeah, guys, that's my review. That's my review for this episode. If you enjoyed the video, like, comment, subscribe. Follow me on Twitter, Facebook, and Mr. Crunchyroll. Dead Knight of Anime, signing off.